In the first episode, Tony finally decided to marry the same woman he cheated with. And for reasons only a bruised ego can explain, he wanted his ex-wife, Tammy, to witness it. So he sent her a wedding invitation. He thought it would break her. He wanted to show the whole world that she had lost. But she came as a billionaire with 3 beautiful children. But that wasn't the end of Tammy's story. In episode 2, Tony lost all his money in a Ponzi scheme. He got into a huge debt that crashed his business. And one day, his creditors came and seized his shop. Since he could no longer take care of his family, his new wife left him and ran away with their 3 children. He was angry, desperate, and blamed his misfortune on Tammy, so he tried to kill Tammy's mother. Fortunately, she survived. Tony pled guilty to attempted murder, made bail, and walked free. But he did not stop threatening Tammy and her family. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Tammy didn't go looking for a lawyer. She wasn't thinking about courtrooms or statutes or appeals. She was thinking about her mother's breathing at night, about the way Mary flinched when a car slowed near the gate, about the fact that Tony was free, walking, drinking, laughing, while Mary slept with a light on. One beautiful Tuesday, Tammy was at the clinic, reviewing intake files, when the receptionist buzzed her office. "There's a man here," she said. "He says he doesn't need an appointment. And he says you won't forgive yourself if you don't hear him out." Tammy almost said no. Almost. Then the man stepped in. Mid-30s, plain suit.no shine.no power posture, hair slightly uncombed, like he'd been arguing with ideas instead of mirrors. He didn't sit immediately, he waited, like someone who understood permission. "My name is Daniel Okoye," he said. "I'm a lawyer. Or at least, I'm trying to be." Tammy raised an eyebrow. He smiled faintly. "I know how that sounds." She gestured to the chair. "You have 5 minutes." Daniel sat forward, elbows on knees. "I read about your mother," he said. "Not the news, the court record. I also read what wasn't there." Tammy's fingers stopped moving. "What wasn't there?" she asked. Daniel opened a slim folder. "Your ex-husband fired 2 shots," he said. "1 to the leg, 1 to the back of the head. The charge was attempted murder." Which is interesting. Tammy felt the familiar heat rise in her chest. Because in Nigerian law, Daniel continued, intent is everything. He slid a page forward. The second shot occurred after the victim was already incapacitated. That's escalation. Escalation implies deliberation. Deliberation implies intent to kill. Tammy leaned in. "So why wasn't that argued?" Daniel exhaled. "Because your lawyer at the time didn't push. And because Tony's lawyer moved faster." Tammy sat back. She'd seen Tony's lawyer, a senior advocate, smooth and expensive, the kind of man judges listen to before he finished sentences. "What are you saying?" she asked. Daniel didn't blink. "I'm saying the case was mishandled. And I'm saying it can be reopened." "You can't reopen a case that's closed," Tammy said. "That's what everyone told me." Daniel nodded. "That's what they tell people who stop asking questions." He flipped to another page. "Tony pled guilty," he said. "That's key. He admitted to the act, not just the attempt." The plea deal was built on the assumption that the injury outcome defined the crime. He looked up, but the law doesn't care about luck. Tammy's breath caught. "If the bullet had landed 1 inch differently," Daniel continued, "your mother would be dead." Intent doesn't change because fate intervened. Silence stretched between them. "You're not a senior advocate," Tammy said. "You're not well known." Daniel smiled again, this time without humor. "That's why I can do this." Tammy frowned. "Explain." "George's lawyer plays the front door," Daniel said. "I play the cracks." He leaned back. "I clerked for a judge who hated shortcuts," he continued. "I've spent years buried in appellate decisions no one quotes because they don't benefit powerful people. And I've been waiting for a case where the truth matters more than reputation." Tammy studied him. "Why me?" Daniel hesitated, just long enough to matter. "My sister was shot by her husband," he said. "She didn't survive." The words landed quietly, that he didn't dramatize them, didn't ask for sympathy. She was told to be patient. He added, and to endure. Tammy felt something shift. "What do you want?" she asked. Daniel met her gaze. To reopen the case. To upgrade the charge. To expose how Tony manipulated the system. And Tammy pressed. "And I need your permission," he said, "because if I do this, I'll make enemies. Real ones." She crossed her arms. "What kind of enemies?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. "The kind who can make my career disappear," he said finally. "The kind who can make me look unethical. The kind who know how to punish lawyers who don't know their place." Tammy stood. She walked to the window. The city hummed below, ordinary, indifferent. She thought of Mary Scott or of Tony's voice on the phone cold. "Certain. How likely is this to work?" she asked without turning around. Daniel didn't lie. "Low," he said, "but not impossible." She turned back. "And Tony's lawyer?" Daniel's mouth tightened. "He's clever," he said. "He doesn't break the law. He bends it until it thanks him." Tammy nodded slowly. "Then why do you think you can beat him?" Daniel stood. "Because he assumes I'm not dangerous." The room went quiet again. Tammy walked back to her desk. She picked up the folder, felt its weight. "If we do this," she said, "we do it properly. No shortcuts. No drama." Daniel nodded. "That's the only way." And in that moment, neither of them noticed a man across the street, sitting in a parked car on the phone, saying one sentence that would change everything. "She's not done." She met Barrister Daniel again 3 days after their first meeting. Not in a law office, not in a courthouse, but in a cafe that smelled like burnt espresso and ambition. He arrived late, not because he was careless, but because he was finishing another case no one thought he could win. Daniel didn't look like the kind of lawyer people trusted with miracles. No expensive watch.no booming confidence.no tailored arrogance. He wore an old Navy jacket with frayed cuffs and carried a leather bag that had seen better decades. His hair was already graying at the temples. His eyes were sharp, restless, the eyes of a man who read between lines most people didn't know existed. Tammy recognized that look. It was the same look she had worn when survival demanded intelligence instead of noise. He listened while she spoke. Didn't interrupt her, didn't reassure her, didn't promise anything. When she finished, he didn't rush to speak. He stirred his coffee slowly, watching the foam collapse. Then he said, "This case is ugly." Tammy nodded. "And it's already tilted," he continued. "The man you're facing understands the system just enough to hide inside it." She nodded again. Daniel leaned forward. "But systems," he said quietly, "always have cracks. People just stopped looking." That was the moment she hired him. Daniel Okoye knew exactly why people thought he would lose. He wasn't loud. He didn't posture. He didn't dress like television lawyers with silk suits and dramatic pauses. He worked quietly, methodically, and most importantly, he asked the questions other lawyers were too afraid to ask. The morning after Tammy signed the papers, Daniel was already moving. He didn't start with Tony. He started with the system. Because men like Tony didn't survive on strength alone. They survived on paperwork, on silence, on small legal blind spots that no one bothered to examine. Daniel walked into the courthouse just after 8 a.m., coffee untouched, eyes already scanning names on the docket. Attempted murder cases rarely reopened. Cases involving domestic violence survivors almost never were. That was the first wall. The second wall was Tony's lawyer. Victor Adebayo had been practicing law for 27 years. He was charming in public, polite in court, deadly in strategy. Victor specialized in cases that made people uncomfortable, not because they were complex, but because they exposed how easily the system could be bent. When Victor heard Daniel Okoye's name attached to Tammy's motion, he laughed. Not out loud, just enough to dismiss him. A charity lawyer, Victor told his junior associate, emotion over evidence. This won't go far. Victor's plan was simple. Delay, discredit, redirect. If the case stayed narrow, attempted murder, probation already granted, the court would see no reason to reopen anything. So Victor filed first, a motion to dismiss based on double jeopardy. His argument was clean. Tony had already pleaded guilty, that he had already been sentenced. The matter was closed. Daniel read the motion once, then smiled, because Victor had made a mistake. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he went digging. He pulled the police report from the night of the shooting, then the hospital records, then the emergency responder logs. And that's when he noticed something strange. The timeline didn't align. According to the report, the second shot was fired after Mary had fallen. According to the ambulance log, Mary was still conscious when responders arrived, something nearly impossible if the bullet had taken the path Tony's lawyer claimed. Daniel requested the original forensic diagram. It took 3 days. When it arrived, he saw it clearly. The bullet trajectory didn't support attempted murder. It supported execution-style intent. That difference mattered. A lot. Daniel wrote one sentence in his notebook and underlined it twice. Intent was misclassified. To prove that, Daniel needed testimony that had never made it to court, which meant reopening wounds, which meant angering people who preferred the past stay buried. He started with the paramedic who arrived first at the scene. The man was retired, living quietly outside Lagos. Didn't want trouble. Daniel drove 6 hours to meet him anyway. They sat on plastic chairs under a mango tree.no recorder.no paperwork. Just memory. The man spoke slowly. Carefully. He said Mary had tried to speak. He said Tony was still nearby when they arrived. He said the gunshot residue test was never completed. Daniel asked why. The man hesitated, then answered, "Someone told us to move fast. No noise." Daniel thanked him and left. He knew then what this case really was. Not just about Tony. About protection. 2 days later, Daniel got a call from an unknown number. A calm voice. Professional. "You're walking into dangerous territory," the man said. "Some cases are better left as they are." Daniel asked who he was speaking to. The line went dead. The message was clear. Back off. Daniel didn't. He forwarded copies of everything to 2 independent journalists and 1 international human rights organization. Insurance. Then he filed his response to Barrister Victor's motion. Victor expected emotion. What he got was precision. Daniel argued that double jeopardy didn't apply because new evidence showed prosecutorial failure. Critical forensic steps were skipped. The original plea was entered without full disclosure facts. He wasn't reopening the sentence. He was reopening the classification of the crime. The judge paused longer than Victor expected. That pause mattered. For the first time, the whole room paused. While the lawyers battled on paper, Tammy felt the heat elsewhere. Online, anonymous posts began circulating, accusations, edited clips, claims that she was exaggerating. One post accused her of orchestrating everything to destroy Tony. Another suggested Mary's injuries were staged. Tammy didn't respond. Daniel told her not to. "Truth doesn't trend immediately," he said, "but it lasts." Still, the pressure mounted. Sponsors hesitated. Partners asked questions. Her foundation received threats. Tammy stayed steady. She had survived worse. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for Tuesday. Victor arrived confident. Daniel arrived prepared. When the judge allowed Daniel to present one witness, just one, Victor objected immediately. Denied. The paramedic took the stand and told the truth. No embellishment.no drama. Just facts. By the time he finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge leaned back and asked a question no one expected. Why was this not presented the first time? Victor didn't answer, because he couldn't. That afternoon, the judge issued a ruling. The case would not be dismissed. It would be reviewed for escalation. Tony's probation status was suspended pending further hearings. For the first time since the gunshot echoed through Mary's driveway, Tony was no longer untouchable. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Daniel adjusted his tie. Tammy stood beside him, calm, composed. Someone asked her if she was afraid. She answered honestly, "No, I'm finished being quiet." Daniel didn't sleep that night, thought he didn't go home either. Instead, he drove to the one place most lawyers avoided after dark, the Magistrate Court Records Annex, a half-forgotten building behind the main courthouse. It wasn't secret, just neglected, which made it perfect. He signed in under archival research. The clerk barely looked up. 3 hours later, Daniel found it. A dismissed assault charge from 12 years earlier. Different woman, different address, same Tony. The charge had been dropped after the complainant withdrew her statement. No follow-up, no prosecution, no explanation. Daniel leaned back slowly. This wasn't Tony's first time. It wasn't even his second. The next morning, Daniel met Tammy at a cafe near the courthouse. He didn't order anything. Neither did she. "I need you to understand something," Daniel said, voice low. "If we push this case the way it deserves to be pushed, people will push back." Tammy didn't flinch. "They already have," she said. "My mother was shot." Daniel nodded once. No dramatics. No sympathy theater. "There's more," he said. "George has a history. Violence that never made it to trial." Tammy closed her eyes. "Just for a second. So he's done this before?" "Yes." "Can we prove it?" Daniel hesitated. "Not yet." That was the problem. Tony's lawyer, meanwhile, was enjoying himself. Barrister Victor, late 50s, immaculate suits, reputation for winning cases that shouldn't be winnable. He had represented politicians, oil executives, and men whose names never appeared in newspapers for long. Victoria understood one thing better than most. The law wasn't about truth. It was about timing, pressure, and fatigue. And Tammy, she was supposed to be tired by now. In court filings, Victor painted Tony as a troubled but rehabilitating man. A victim of provocation. A man who lost control in a moment of emotional distress. He filed motions aggressively, delayed hearings, objected to everything, demanded psychiatric evaluations. Every move designed to drain Tammy, emotionally and financially. 2 days later, Daniel's office was broken into. Nothing stolen, nothing damaged, just his files, moved. Someone wanted him to know he was being watched. Daniel didn't call the police. He called Tammy. Tammy noticed a change in Daniel before he said anything. They met the next morning at a cafe near the courthouse. Neutral ground, glass walls, too public for threats. Daniel arrived early, untouched coffee in front of him, eyes sharper than usual. "You okay?" Tammy asked, sitting down. Daniel nodded once. Too quickly. "They wiped one of my folders last night." Tammy didn't react. She had learned not to flinch at danger. "Not anymore." "What does that mean?" she asked calmly. "It means Tony's lawyer knows I'm not playing defense," Daniel said. "It means they are nervous." "And you?" Daniel met her eyes. "It means we're closer than I thought." Tammy exhaled slowly. "Are you saying this case is bigger than Tony?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Then, carefully, "I'm saying George isn't the top of the food chain." The next court session was electric. Victor arrived confident, almost bored. Tony sat beside him, calm in a way that felt rehearsed. Daniel stood when cold. And instead of responding to the motion before the court, he did something unexpected. He requested permission to submit new evidence. Victor objected instantly. "Your Honor, this is procedural abuse." Daniel didn't argue. He simply handed over a sealed envelope. The judge frowned as he reviewed the contents. The room shifted. Victor's confidence flickered, just for a second. But Daniel saw it. That was all he needed. Because now Victor knew something too. This case was no longer clean. And in legal warfare, once blood is on the floor, no one leaves untouched. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered. For the first time, Tony avoided eye contact. Daniel leaned toward Tammy as they walked out. "This is where it gets ugly," he said. Tammy nodded. "I didn't survive everything just to stop now." Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since the case began, he believed, not hoped, that they could win. But winning would come at a cost. And someone was about to make Daniel pay it. Victory never announces itself. .it arrives quietly and then sends a bill. By the time Tammy realized what the case was costing her, it was already too late to turn back. Daniel warned her early. "This won't end clean," he said one night, sitting across from her in his office, files stacked like small, waiting fires. "They won't come after you in court first. They'll come after your life." Tammy nodded. She didn't say she was ready. She didn't say she wasn't afraid. She just said, "I know." The first thing she lost was sleep. Not the kind that fades slowly, the kind that vanishes overnight. She started waking at 2:14 a.m. every night, same minute, Same jolt. Heart racing, phone in her hand before she was fully awake. She checked on Mary constantly. Mary pretended not to notice. "You'll worry yourself sick," she said gently. Stirring tea she didn't drink, Tammy smiled but didn't stop checking. Then came the calls. Unknown numbers, breathing silence. Once, a voice said, "You think the law protects you." Then hung up. Daniel traced some of them. Burner phones, unregistered SIMs. Enough to intimidate, not enough to prosecute. That was the point. Tony never contacted Tammy directly. He didn't need to. He let other people do it. A woman from her past messaged her on Facebook. Someone she hadn't spoken to in years. "You're embarrassing yourself." The message read, "Why can't you let sleeping dogs lie?" Another said, "You know powerful people are involved now, right?" Daniel explained it simply. "They are testing you," he said, "seeing how much pressure it takes before you retreat." Tammy didn't retreat, but the pressure found new places to land. Her consultancy lost a contract. No explanation, just a polite email. A week later, another one fell through. Daniel watched it happen, jaw tight. "They are squeezing your oxygen," he said. "They can't beat you legally yet, so they're starving you quietly." Tammy nodded. She cut expenses, paused expansion plans. Let go of 2 staff members she'd mentored herself. That one hurt more than she expected. She cried alone that night. Not because she was weak, because leadership costs. Mary noticed a change. The pauses before Tammy answered. The way she scanned rooms automatically. The way she listened for footsteps that weren't there. "You're paying too much," Mary said one evening, voice calm but firm. "I survived bullets. Don't let fear finish what they couldn't." Tammy swallowed. "It's not fear," she said. "It's responsibility." Mary reached across the table. "That's what makes it dangerous," she replied. Daniel paid his own price, too. The Bar Association called him in. Not officially, not formally, just a conversation. They asked about his methods, his sources, his interest in a case with political sensitivities. He answered carefully. He left unsettled. A senior colleague pulled him aside later. "You're walking close to the edge," the man said quietly. "People don't lose cases like this. They lose careers." Daniel went home that night and stared at his ceiling for hours. He didn't call Tammy. He didn't want her carrying his doubt. Tony, meanwhile, was enjoying the chaos. Every now and then, he'd say to someone within earshot, "They are wasting their time." And he wasn't entirely wrong. Because despite everything Daniel had uncovered, the falsified affidavits, the coerced witnesses, the financial inconsistencies, none of it had detonated yet. It was all potential energy, unreleased, dangerous. That week, Tammy flew back to Canada. She needed distance to think. On the plane, she finally let herself feel it. The exhaustion, the anger she'd disciplined into neat boxes, the unfairness. She thought of how close Tony came to killing her mother, and how easily the system had shrugged. She thought of how survival kept demanding more proof. At 35,000 feet, she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just tears sliding sideways into her hair. Daniel called her when she landed. "I might have something," he said, "but if we use it, it changes everything." Tammy didn't ask what. She asked one question only. "Does it protect my mother?" Daniel paused. "Yes," he said, "for now." "That's enough," Tammy replied. What Daniel didn't say, what Tammy didn't yet know, was that the move he was preparing would expose people far above Tony. Men who didn't threaten with calls. Men who were raised quietly. And once that door opened, there would be no turning back. Not for Daniel. Not for Tammy. Not for anyone standing too close. Because justice doesn't arrive all at once. First, it demands payment. And in Tammy's case, the bill was still climbing. Please subscribe to the channel and tell me if you need part 4 of this story in the comment section.